This is TDPS.
I'm Christopher Rice.
And I'm Eric Shaw Quinn.
And Eric and I aren't just podcasters.
And bitches.
That's right. We're also authors, and you can buy all of our books at www.thedinnerpartyshowcomp12504 or tdps.tv and wherever ebooks are sold.
At thedinnerpartyshowcomp or tdps.tv, you can check out my Right Murder mystery series.
Or sample my Burning Girl thrillers.
The best part is, the more you buy our books, the less likely we'll end up filling the spot with an annoying ad for a napkin that counts your calories.
The TDPS Network, alienating potential advertisers one promo at a time. Hi, I'm Christopher Rice.
And I'm Eric Shaw Quinn.
And you're listening to TDPS Presents Christopher.
And Eric.
And we are back with the second half of what we are calling a crime pairing here at TDPS.
Right? Last week we did True Crime TV Club, and it was an episode of, what was the show? The Crime That Changed Us or something like that. The Crime That Completes Me.
The Crimes That Changed Us. Yeah, I think is what it's called. It's on Discovery Plus. It's a new show. They just did a couple episodes in 2020. We did the Atlanta Olympic Park bombings. And so that sets us up. You don't have to have listened to that episode to enjoy the one that we're about to do.
Though it's free and you can just download it, so why wouldn't you?
I mean, why not? Today we are going to talk about the Clint Eastwood directed movie Richard Jewell.
Which is based on the same story.
Exactly. And so where do we begin with this?
Well, Atlanta, 1996, I think is a good place to start.
Atlanta, 1996. Typically, when we do the True Crime Movie Time, we're a little bit more free-ranging in how we talk about the story. As we talked about last week, the essence of the story is that in 1996, a bomb went off in Olympic Centennial Park during the Olympics in Atlanta. The security guard, Richard Jewell, who was credited initially with finding the bomb.
He wasn't just credited with it. He actually found the bomb and saved hundreds of people's lives by clearing them out of the way.
The bomb detonated. It was filled with shrapnel. One person was killed. A second person, a Turkish state news cameraman, died of a heart attack as he was racing to cover the scene.
And hundreds were injured.
What's fascinating to me about the movie we're going to talk about today is that it really fills in what felt like gaps in the special that we talked about previously, because essentially what happened was that the FBI began to investigate Richard as they would have investigated anybody in the course of an investigation into a bombing like that. The person who finds the bomb is always investigated. But somebody with law enforcement, according to what we watched last week, leaked to a reporter who was not named in the special that we watched last week that Richard Jewell was the primary suspect in the Centennial Park bombings.
And that was based on this thing, the lone bomber profile theory or something that they had of the guy who did it, who was being a failed white guy, frustrated law enforcement person who with a hero complex or whatever it was. But there was this very sort of specific thing. They were able to make Richard Jewell fit into that cookie cutter mold that they had come up with. And perhaps he was, in fact, their primary suspect. I don't know that we necessarily know that from either the movie or the True Crime TV show that we reviewed last time. But whatever the case, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution ran an article saying that he was, and that became fact.
That became fact. They then became under pressure because of their own leaks to prove that he was the guy. They tried to trick him into an interview, essentially, which we saw on the special last week. They told him that they were going to do a training video that was about...
I thought that some of that was staged. Like, it was weird to me. That was like one of the things we do with the crime pairing is that we look at how the movie matches up with the facts that were presented in the other story. And I thought there was a difference there. There was a sense of this sort of almost comical kind of effort to they went to his house and said, "We're making a training film. Would you like to help us? And come. You can just do it. It'll just take a little while, and then you can go to work afterwards." And then they presented him with this sort of zany set of circumstances in this comic almost sort of way. And I thought, I don't feel like this is accurate. Like, I think they did bring him in. I think they filmed him, like they said, as part of, as though it was part of training. And I think they probably did ask him to sign that paper saying that he waived his Miranda rights or whatever, that he'd read them and that he was willing to answer questions without. But to accuse the FBI of telling him they were just making a training video and he was such a hero, they wanted him to be in it. One of the things that the movie really capitalized on was the way in which Richard Jewell's sudden fame and media attention turned his head a bit. He was really a hero. He was interviewed on the Today Show by Katie Couric. He was, the guy who found the bomb and saved those lives. And he seems to have been, or at least the movie depicted him, pretty humble about it. He said there were lots of heroes and lots of people helping, and that he did find the bomb, but that people reacted and helped him do whatever. And and they also had given some background that in the true crime TV show came later, but in this it came
not
first.
In as much detail. Let's talk about where the movie starts, because the movie does not begin in Olympic Park.
No.
The movie began, I think there were two sort of prologue scenes.
The movie really, I think, does a pretty good job of showing that he's kind of a failure. He's kind of had a failed career. He wants to be in law enforcement. It hasn't really panned out. He started out being a supply guy, the supply guy at this legal defense fund.
The Small Business Association, where he meets a really fiery lawyer named Watson Bryant, who is played by Sam Rockwell in the movie.
Best thing that ever happened to Richard Jewell was meeting that guy. And they have an unusual sort of friendship. He really admires Watson, and Watson is kind to him. I don't know that they seemed really close, but you get a sense of him starting out. And then he gets a job working, I guess the next thing, or at least from the movie, at Piedmont College as a
working as security guard. And there's a scene where he is called to a dorm room full of noisy boys to investigate a noise complaint. He's depicted as, the boys are depicted as being hostile, provocative jerks, but he is depicted as being a little bit overly aggressive, forcing his way into the dorm room with no sort of warrant or anything. There's a physical tussle that results. He pushes one of the boys, and then we cut to Richard in the provost or the president of the university's office, and they lay out a pretty problematic work history, which includes the fact, which was included in the previous special we watched, that Richard was pulling people over off of campus property. And his justification for doing that was, well, better I get them there than on campus where they can cause trouble.
Before they ever get here. It was that's a little not a great theory. And the president, provost, whatever guy doesn't really buy it. He's pretty, he listens to it and he's patient. And he apparently even had told the guy that he didn't want any monkey business on campus, but he didn't mean that he was supposed to be beating up on students or being overly aggressive. I don't know that he was beating them up, but he was being
too aggressive.
Too aggressive with the students and with the enforcement and with whatever. Although I would think that would be given the way that students behave, I would think that would be a really hard job.
Yeah.
Having been physically assaulted by a campus authority figure myself.
Were you?
Yes. When I was at a summer conference at Georgetown University, the debate, it was like a debate convention. You went and learned to be a better debater. The final night was party night at the dorm, and the guys kind of trashed and teepeed the halls, and everybody was drunk and carried on. And I had actually been quite sick and was listening to, I think it was called, it wasn't called True Crime Theater, but it was some kind of radio suspense theater thing at a neighbor's. I'm such a wild man. And I walked across the hall, and there was a resident, an RA, they called them, a resident, I don't know, authority. Advisor. Yeah, maybe that's it.
They're supposed to be advisors, but they act like authority figures, yeah.
Well, he kind of was. And everybody was wild, and the hall was crazy, and he was sort of standing there looking around at this, destruction all around us. It wasn't terrible, but it was trashed. There was TP everywhere and that sort of thing. It wasn't like people had been breaking out windows or spray painting the walls. Anyway, I said, oh, everybody try and look sober. There's an RA on the hall. And I went in my room. And the next thing I knew, the door to my room flew open, and he was just... he was trying to strangle me. It was
oh my God.
Yeah. It was a really unpleasant experience. So, I think there is a line.
Yes, totally.
And I definitely have been on the other side of it, and I feel for the students, but I do also feel that it's difficult to maintain discipline amidst such a hormonally challenged group of people in the midst of their own, finding their own freedom, shall we say.
Totally. So we go from there to the run-up to the Olympics in Atlanta, Georgia in 1996, which I vividly remember. I'm sure you remember it, too. It was an American Olympics.
Yeah.
We meet a reporter named Kathy Scruggs, played amazingly by Olivia Wilde.
Love Olivia Wilde. Amazing job, but wow.
Also, we're going to get to this portrayal was incredibly controversial, and the controversy around it might have doomed this movie. And we'll talk about that more. That's what my supplemental material that I brought in is about. But she is depicted as being highly aggressive, highly profane, driven entirely by ambition, and she is looking for a story, and she
almost
thinks
soulless.
The Olympics are a bore. And so she has been told to go to Centennial Park and look for some sort of story.
Right.
Okay. When she goes to Centennial Park, she also meets an FBI agent named Tom Shaw, played by John Hamm. I think Tom Shaw is fictional. I think Tom Shaw is either a composite
I thought he was supposed to be that Stubbs guy from the previous whatchamacallit.
But yeah, given what's coming, they couldn't call him Stubbs because they would end up in court. So,
but yeah, there was a given of whatever, and he too is depicted as, this is so boring and beneath me to be attending these games. I need something. I need action. I need something big and important to happen, and then kaboom. Something does.
And Richard is working security at the park, and he is working at the AT&T Communications Tower. And we get scenes leading up to the big event where his mom comes to the park 2 nights before to see Kenny Rogers play. People are socializing. Richard, again, is very much trying to be good friends with the police officers who are on duty, trying to impress them.
He's bringing them soft drinks.
Right.
He keeps soft drinks and water on hand for people who seem like he needed. He's trying to be a good guy, and he's trying to do above and beyond to further his own ambitions to be in some way involved in some kind of law enforcement capacity.
And we go through a very specific accounting, if you will, of everything that Richard was doing, or I guess is reported to have done, at the park prior to the bombing. And we as the audience are shown this in greater detail than Richard himself is able to remember it later in the film when he is interviewed. We see that his time prior to the bombing is accounted for fully. He engages with some rowdy kids who are drunk behind the tower, tells them to get lost. They're really hostile. He has to go and get them. We go through all of his sort of although the more I think about it, I think that was the prior night. We see 2 nights. But
no, that was the same night. He went and got the police. He brought them back.
Right.
They came over, and by that point, the bomb had already been planted, and in the kerfuffle with the kids that he's gone to get the police to try and, get some order because they won't respect him because, frankly, he's a security guard for AT&T, and they don't really recognize the sovereign authority of AT&T, but they do recognize the Atlanta police, and they run for it, and they knock over this bag that they actually had interacted with briefly. Thank goodness nothing bad happened. Richard says it's an abandoned package, and everybody's a little bit dismissive of him. And he's like, no, this is an abandoned package. This should be checked out. We should do. And he really insists, even though people are not really taking him seriously, kind of because he's that guy. He's that nebbishy kind of guy who's just really sort of a little too by the books, and everybody else is wanting to lighten up about it. And they bring in somebody and they open it up, and what do you know? The bag is full of pipe bombs.
3 pipe bombs tied together. The bomb squad guy opens the backpack. He reveals the pipe bombs. He turns around, and Richard says to the person next to him, in training, they tell you the moment to freak out is when the bomb tech guy turns white, and that's what's happening.
Yeah.
And so there is a slapdash and largely resisted effort to evacuate the area.
Richard, to get people to clear back 100 feet or something like that. They're trying, and they do okay at it, but not great because they don't even know how long they have.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that has been depicted is the call to 911.
That's correct.
Which seemed to not be taken as seriously by 911 even as it might have been.
There's no sense.
It became significant later, but at the time it doesn't seem like they even let anybody know that it had happened. I don't know which is true, and it wasn't clear from the True Crime TV coverage of it last week either.
Yeah. So the scene of the bomb going off is an incredibly well-directed and terrifying movie scene. I'm Christopher Rice.
And I'm Eric Shaw Quinn.
Do you have a question or comment about this podcast?
Then come share it with us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/thedinnerpartyshow, no spaces, and we'll do our best to answer it on the show.
Just watch out for our aggrieved manservant, Shea Butters. He moderates the page, and he's been known to talk smack about the two of us.
Most of what he says about you is true, though.
We can discuss this later.
That's right, at facebook.com/thedinnerpartyshow.
No, I meant in the car.
Yeah, it was the bomb sequence was really like, because you get the sense of it, nobody is getting the urgency. Everybody is having a good time, has got a little buzz on, has had a few beers and whatever, and nobody is really reacting to the urgency. And we as the audience know that there's a bomb and what happened, and they're trying to get them to move. And it really does create this sort of anticipatory tension.
It's a study in filmmaking, isn't it? Because we all know what's coming, and the way they drag it out, what I thought was usually that can just be annoying, but it was really effective because you didn't know exactly. I didn't know exactly when the bomb was going to go off. I didn't know that the backpack was discovered in that detail.
Well, and we had seen the True Crime special last week, so we had a little more information. Like the one woman who was killed is depicted very distinctly in the movie, and like she's posing for a picture. That she's not doing something insidious, but she's also far more focused on posing for the picture than she is on evacuating. Because they're not screaming bomb, bomb, or, they're trying to get people to evacuate in an orderly fashion. And then kaboom.
Kaboom. And almost immediately, Richard is a hero. The media descends on him. We see the smarmy AT&T communications guy is setting Richard up for interviews.
Sure, it's great PR for AT&T.
Yeah, he was
Our guy spotted the bomb and whatever. And he's talking to people, and he's being, again, depicted as being pretty humble. About all of it.
Then we get to the scene that turned this movie into a Twitter firestorm.
It was quite a choice, I have to say, on the part of the movie makers and the scriptwriter. It was like, well, okay, I don't know. I'm not sure you should be making this call.
Okay, so Kathy Scruggs, played by Olivia Wilde, goes to a bar where John Hamm, the FBI agent, is drinking away his guilt over not having predicted this. He says, a bomb went off in my park. How do you think I feel? And basically, she goes full, I don't know what word we'd even be allowed to use, but she is sliding her hands up his thighs. She is leaning in to
she's making it clear that for some information, she'd be happy to.
And that's when the fight started.
And that's when the fight started.
And we're going to fucking get into this. Okay, this is what I went to research, because this was really the only thing I saw about this film when it came out, was people fighting about this insinuation that Kathy Scruggs had traded sex for tips. And when the movie came out, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution said, this is not true. that Kathy was, quote, not a floozy. But in their own article, they said someone in Scruggs' Rolodex led to the biggest story of her career, but those close to her say it was also her undoing. The report saying investigators were focusing on Jewel days after the bombing was accurate at the time. They questioned him, searched his belongings, and kept him under surveillance for months. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution was among the media outlets sued after Jewel was exonerated and the only one that didn't settle. The articles in their entirety were substantially true at the time they were published. So just to tell you, if you don't know what's coming, the information that was alleged to have been exchanged in this moment between the John Hamm character and the Olivia Wilde character is that Richard Jewell is our number one suspect. And Olivia Wilde, who is not shown having sex with John Hamm, but basically completes the interaction by saying, are we going to go back to your room?
We're on the clock.
We're on the clock.
You want to do the car? You want to go back up to your room? Like,
yeah.
She is really, like, it is not unclear that she's going to have sex with him for giving her this information.
So Ron Martz, who is an Atlanta Journal-Constitution, that's it, the AJC, we're going to call it, so I don't screw up the name. He was interviewed in the special we watched last week.
Right.
Kathy Scruggs is never named in that special.
And she's passed away is the other part of it, so she can't really defend herself
She can't
one way or
defend
the
herself.
other. And so nobody actually knows.
Nobody actually knows, but here was what her own paper reported about her, that she always drank a fair amount and smoked a fair amount and took drugs, Prozac for depression, Fen-Phen for weight loss, Lipitor for cholesterol, Xanax for anxiety. She took all this stuff that interacted with each other. In the last year of her life, anguished over the ongoing legal action, Scruggs was on medical leave from the newspaper. Law enforcement loved her, just loved her, said an author, Kent Alexander, who was a former federal prosecutor. The book does note the time police responded at 3 a.m. when Scruggs refused to get out of a taxi outside of a Buckhead hotel. She was drunk, naked, and sitting in the driver's seat. So, yeah, that portrayed like the sort of go, go, go on the edge. Yeah, they said she
was the kind of woman who would wear a leather miniskirt and fishnet hose to work.
Yeah.
That totally. She was that sort of person. So it's like...
But how the mystery remains... how that piece of information was exactly exchanged in that moment, how she got that tip. But she was the one who got that tip. She took it into the office. Ron Martz was in the office. The scene
ran over both. It was both their byline.
Yeah. And so it became, according to the depiction in the movie, the editor of the newspaper decides to scrap their afternoon edition and replace the headline with something like Hero Security Guard is primary suspect in Olympic Park bombing.
Right.
And Richard Jewell's life just completely goes to fucking shit, which we talked about in detail, I think, last week. I don't know if we need to go into as much detail about it. We can sort of get into our larger thoughts about the movie.
Well, I would just say that the movie pretty well followed along with the same sort of timeline. The questioning, like I say, I felt like what was depicted in the true crime special we watched last week seemed a little more subdued than the sort of Keystone Cops interview that they did, the comic interview that they did with Richard in this one. I thought that was as much of a misdepiction as characterizing Kathy as having traded sex for the information.
So you don't believe she traded sex for the information?
I don't know. Yeah. I have no idea, and so I don't think... In keeping with my feelings last week and this week, I don't think that if you have the information, if you don't have the information, you should convict somebody of it.
Right.
I really believe that strongly, even for Kathy, who I would, like to punch for what she did to poor Richard. I just think her behavior was as irresponsible as the treatment of her in this movie, and I think the same was true for the treatment of the FBI in this movie. I'm sure they have their problems. Kathy clearly did, but without actual corroboration, to say that they did that sort of insane comic, we're going to make a training film. You want to help us make a training film? Blah, blah, blah. That was just ridiculous. I think they brought him in. I think they said, we're going to film this. I think they did a lot of things that are true in here. And I think they also interviewed him more than once. Also something that wasn't part of the part of the movie. There was the one time it was this big, ridiculous kind of scene with John Hamm and the guy who used to play the husband on
Cougar Town,
who I think is a riot, and he's very funny, and the scene is kind of comically funny. The guy who plays Richard, by the way, is one of the henchmen in Cruella.
Oh, yeah?
I'm not sure if he's British or not. The character in Cruella was, but Emma Thorne isn't, so why should...
Emma Stone,
Emma Stone. Emma Thorne. Who's that?
Thorne.
Bella Thorne.
I don't know, but I like him. We should name a character Emma
Thorne is great, but
okay.
Emma Stone is not. But yeah, but anyway, so it kind of comes off as a comic scene, and then you throw in Sam Rockwell's sort of high-pitched response to it, because in the same way as in the story, they get to the place where they ask him to sign the document. And in the movie, by this point, Richard has already been solicited by Simon & Schuster. Interesting that Schuster was the person from CNN last week. Simon & Schuster has offered him a book deal, and Richard has called Watson, his friend from the beginning of the movie, to ask his opinion about it, and Watson says, "Don't sign anything.
Don't sign anything. Get out of there
without talking to me." And so then, no, that was with the book publishers.
Oh, right.
So then, by the time he gets to being asked to sign the document that is clearly asking him to say that he's waived his Miranda rights and understands that, he's entitled to a lawyer and whatever, he says, this is a real document, because he fakes signing it. And they say, no, you have to really sign it. And he said, yeah, I'm not comfortable with that. I need to call my lawyer. And they call him, and the lawyer gets on the phone
do you think that
with John Hamm and says, get him the fuck out of there right now.
And do you think that bit of stage business, the fake signature, which is not in the special, do you think that was scripted? Do you think that was an invention of the movie?
That's what I'm saying. It's like they over dramatized that particular thing, and it became sort of comical. And I think the thing about the Simon & Schuster thing and then being asked to sign something else, that's a nice connection.
Yeah, totally.
That sort of works for me. I could believe that.
Yeah, totally.
My lawyer has said don't sign anything, and here I'm being asked to sign something, and so I'm going to call my lawyer. Now, that triggers him calling the lawyer. I thought that seemed believable, but the rest of it seemed a little over the top.
Yeah, okay.
And that the story is pretty over the top. It kind of fits, but again, it's like, let's be fair about how we're depicting everybody, including the FBI and Kathy Scruggs, even though I think both of them should have been charged with something after what they did to this poor man. Anyway.
So, the special last week did not identify who finally decided to walk from the payphone where the bomb threat was made to the site of the bombing to see if Richard could have possibly made the threat and then returned to his post. Okay, the movie depicts Kathy Scruggs as having made that walk.
Particularly doing it. They come in to talk to the lawyer, and Richard come in to talk to the editor, and the lawyer really takes her to task for what she's done to Richard, calls her a hack and that sort of thing. They have quite a moment you can see that she's questioning her decision.
Yes.
And so then it's like she then begins to do some reporting, and she goes to where the phone call was placed, and she sees clearly that it couldn't have been him who placed the call, because he couldn't have placed the call and then gone back to find the bomb and move the people back, because it's just too great a distance.
Something that was included in the movie, which was not mentioned in the special at all, to my recollection, was that the FBI responded to that piece of information by saying, well then, similar to what we saw in our coverage of 2020's Taken a few episodes ago, well then they must have had an accomplice. And so they go after a good friend, shooting buddy of Richard's, that we saw at the firing range.
And accuse them of being homosexual lovers.
Yes, which I'm sure was not the language they were using in private about that in 1996.
Feel relatively certain. And Richard is deeply disturbed by that and wants that off the record as well, which was maybe a little twingy, but he's not shitty about it, but he's not okay with it that they're accusing him of that, but he sees it as an accusation and
a further attempt to smear him is how he sort of views it. And it may have been on the part of the FBI in that time.
At that point in time, it would have been. It would have been whatever. And so there is some continuing reaction to that. But there is a whole series of escalating assaults on Richard, on his family. There's the search of the house. There's continuing character assassination in public. The media catches the story and goes wild with it. They can't get any kind of anything done. Like, it destroys them. It destroys them in much more graphic terms than last week because it's a movie and it's and so they're keen to dramatize the way that things work out. But
they also lay some. It's not blame necessarily, but they continue to depict Richard's inability to not shut up. Like they do the search and the lawyer says to him when the FBI is coming to search the house, don't say anything. And Richard is still so attached to this idea of seeing himself as a member of law enforcement, seeing himself as one of these guys, quote unquote, that he can't stop being solicitous of them, but he can't stop trying to engage them and in a way that could potentially incriminate himself. Yeah. And they finally have to make him leave the apartment. The lawyer says, okay, we have to go sit outside.
Yeah, it is really like... There is some sense of trying to capture Richard's complacency. I don't know that it's that, but his contribution to his own downfall,
self-sabotage,
the petard that he hoisted
need to be
himself upon was in many ways of his own making, because what starts the FBI down the path of investigating him is an interview with his boss from Piedmont College, who says, I would feel guilty if I didn't say something. I'm not saying that he did this or that I even think he could do this, but if I hadn't said something, I would feel bad.
And I thought the depiction of that guy was pretty nuanced. They didn't show him as some mustache-twirling victim who was just out to get Richard. Like the opening scene, Richard has done some really questionable stuff while working at Piedmont College.
Yeah.
Nothing on the level of terrorism, but essentially impersonating an officer, overstepping his professional boundaries.
And trying to be a hero, being the failed non-law enforcement person who's trying to be the hero. That is very much the profile they are looking to fill, and he really is hitting a lot of the marks.
So we get where we left off with the through line of the movie is that we did the search. Okay, the search is done. They finally bring him in with the lawyer at FBI headquarters in Atlanta. How much of that scene did we think was real? It was pretty Hollywood, where he finally tells them, you guys stop harassing me.
Because the lawyer has been about telling him to stand up for himself. And I think it was probably a composite of things. Like, the character, even as is depicted in the movie, doesn't seem to have the sort of erudition to make a really remarkable speech to the... But the thing that he asks them seems really fair. Do you have anything on me or anything you can charge me with?
I'm Christopher Rice.
And I'm Eric Shaw Quinn.
And Eric and I aren't just podcasters.
And bitches.
That's right. We're also authors, and you can buy all of our books at www.thedinnerpartyshow.com or tdps.tv and wherever ebooks are sold.
At thedinnerpartyshow.com or tdps.tv, you can check out my Right Murder mystery series.
Or sample my Burning Girl thrillers.
The best part is, the more you buy our books, the less likely we'll end up filling the spot with an annoying ad for a napkin that counts your calories.
The TDPS Network, alienating potential advertisers one promo at a time. And the answer to the question of whether or not the FBI had anything to actually charge Richard Jewell with was no. And so they didn't. And eventually they had to submit this is, again, the movie talking. I don't know if it unfolded in this way. They provide Richard in person, out of view of any media or cameras, with a letter saying, we're super sorry we ruined your life. And
they didn't say that at all. They just said that it appears that you aren't guilty.
It appears that you aren't guilty. And the John Hamm character, who again we believe is either a composite or a cover for somebody real, says, just so you know, I don't believe any of this. I'm just delivering it.
I think you're guilty as hell.
And if you listened last week or you know anything about this story, Richard was not only not guilty, somebody else was, who went on to bomb 2 abortion clinics and a gay bar in Northwest Georgia a year later, and Alabama.
On a married manhunt chase for years thereafter before finally being brought in and confessing to everything.
And so the movie does not go into really the Eric Rudolph angle of this. It's about Richard Jewell. It's not about the bombing.
Which I thought was unfortunate.
Yeah.
They alluded to the fact that they had caught him. He turns up at the police station where Richard Jewell is working as a police officer, which I thought was great. Yeah. Glad to see he finally got a job. He looks like he's working at the front desk, but he's still working there.
He was working for a police department.
And the lawyer comes in and he says they got him. And he says, do you know where he's being arraigned? And he said, I can find out. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how they leave it.
That's how they leave
it. I wanted there to be more of the, it turns out it was this guy. The sense of, because the thing that really struck me in the True Crime TV Club version of this was the sense that this could have been, like, lives could have been saved if they had actually investigated the crime.
And they say that earlier. They have that in a dialogue that felt a little bit on the nose. Richard says to one of the FBI agents, you know, you're not wasting all your time on me, and the real guy is out there somewhere, and you're not finding him.
But that was really
doesn't come at the
true.
End. Yeah.
And I really would like for that to have been clear. And it wasn't, because that's not the way that the filmmakers framed it. But I could have done with more of that, less of the retribution and the victimization, and more of the outcome, the truth of the story.
And that's really the end of the movie.
Yeah, that is definitely the end of the movie.
I went to research the thing that the movie leaves out that I think is interesting is that this ruined Kathy Scruggs' life too. She descended like
it really should have.
She died almost at the same age as Richard. She died at 43.
Didn't wish her that.
She died of a drug overdose. It really sort of began to phase her out. She had battled addiction issues her entire life. By the end of her career, she was really doing very little for the paper. The paper had gone through a series of lawsuits. And they were refusing to settle because, as I said earlier, they said the stories were substantively true at the time that they were published. But they hinged on Kathy's source, which she would never reveal. And when she died, she was facing potential jail time over it. She said she would go to jail before she revealed the source. She had actually been ordered by a Fulton County judge to name their tipsters. Ron Martz had been put under the same order as well. And she would say, quote, I will go to jail before I reveal my source. She never did. She was very determined, and the case was on appeal at the time that she died. So when this firestorm erupted around the scene that implied she'd traded sex for tips, the movie's screenwriter did not issue an apology. In fact, he did quite the opposite. His name is Billy Ray.
Yes.
He's got quite a resume. He's also a political activist for the Democratic Party, which I think is interesting given the film's kind of conservative bent. The shots of the lawyer
and
show
the director.
Yeah, a bumper sticker above Sam
yelling
Rockwell.
At a chair at the Mitt Romney nominating convention. Yeah.
And the bumper sticker, did you see in Sam Rockwell's office? I fear the government more than I fear terrorism, which was like, oh, okay, well.
That's nice.
So the Billy Ray's statement in response to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution said this. This movie is about a hero whose life was completely destroyed by myths created by the FBI and the media, specifically the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. The AJC hung Richard Jewell in public. They editorialized wildly and printed assumptions as facts. They compared him to noted mass murderer Wayne Williams, and this was after he had saved hundreds of lives. Now a movie comes along 23 years later, a perfect chance for the AJC to atone for what they did to Richard and to admit to their misdeeds. And what do they decide to do? They launch a distraction campaign. They deflect and distort. They focus solely on one single minute in a movie that's 129 minutes long, opting to challenge one assertion in the movie rather than accepting their own role in destroying the life of a good man. The movie isn't about Kathy Scruggs. It's about the heroism and hounding of Richard Jewell and what rushed reporting can do to an innocent man. And by the way, I will stand by every word and assertion in the script. So there was that.
Good for Billy.
And then Olivia Wilde got brought in.
Right.
And she said, contrary to a swath of recent headlines, I do not believe Kathy traded sex for tips. Nothing in my research suggested she did so, and it was never my intention to suggest that she had. That would be an appalling and misogynistic dismissal of the difficult work she did. As I understood it, Kathy and the FBI agent who leaked false information to her were in a pre-existing romantic relationship, not a transactional exchange of sex for information. I cannot speak for the creative decisions made by the filmmakers, as I did not have a say in how the film was ultimately crafted. But it's important to me that I share my personal take on the matter. Then Twitter got mad at her because over gender issues and women can be sexual and blah, blah, blah. So she had to issue another statement that said, what I resented was this character being boiled down to one inferred scene, and I don't hear anyone complaining about John Hamm's character as being inferred that he also had a relationship with a reporter. It feels unfair that Kathy has been minimized in this way. I think that we are still struggling with allowing for female characters who aren't entirely quote unquote likable. If there's anything slightly questionable about a female character, we often use that in relation to condemn that character, condemn the project for allowing for a woman to be impure in a way. It's a misunderstanding of okay. And basically we're leaving the stuff that we want to talk about with this sort of gender talk, which is a separate conversation. But this was all I saw about the movie, was this debate and this conversation.
So congratulations to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution for once again covering their ass for having done some of the most irresponsible and unjustifiable reporting that I have ever seen in my entire life.
I mean, really, right up until the end, man.
I'm just what scumbags.
Yeah.
I don't wish them ill, and I'm a big proponent of free speech. I'm a gay man in America. Most of what I have had to say most of my life has been the stuff people don't want to hear. So I get how important free speech is, but I also understand that just like the Second Amendment proposing that we can keep and bear arms, it doesn't mean that you can keep a howitzer at your house.
Right.
Free speech is also conditioned on being responsible. And I think that kind of irresponsible use of free speech, abuse of free speech, is something that we're really contending with right